So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Chris Benjamin. I'm the managing editor of Atlantic Books Today magazine with the Atlantic Publishers Marketing Association. And this is the Read Atlantic Voices interview series featuring Black authors, highlighting some of the important issues they write about and the important work they do, the pride they take in their communities, in their writing. And I'm very pleased today to be joined by author Andre Fenton, as well as our co-host Sylvia Parris-Drummond from the Delmore Daye Learning Institute. So just a quick word on our guest Andre, who kind of made his name as a spoken word poet, competed in multiple national competitions on behalf of the Halifax team. But since then has published two critically acclaimed young adult novels, Worthy of Love and his most recent Annaka. He's proven to be a multi-talented writer, and we're very pleased to have Andre here today with us. But first I'll pass it on to Sylvia.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Thanks for the introduction, and a thank you and a welcome to Andre. Once again, thank you so much. We're very pleased to have Andre at the Delmore Daye Learning Institute, part of some of the events that we've had. So this is really, multiple special moments to have this conversation happen. And I think I need to acknowledge too that I've often run into Andre in community and on the sidewalk, and just had really kind of wonderful conversations, and been so impressed with you, Andre, since our chance to meet, and really feel very fortunate to be able to have you share with us today, and with the folks who will be listening. So thank you for saying yes. So what I want to do is to let you begin. We know that community is very important. We know that often community, family, kinship, and maybe your writing pieces have been intertwined. So maybe you could start telling us a bit about yourself and let the conversation flow from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me on today. This is very exciting. And yeah, just really excited to be on this platform and talk about the work. Yeah, I guess I've always had this... I've always really loved those coming of age YA novels, young adult fiction, and when I was in high school, that's where I spent most of my time, kind of like in the libraries, like using it as kind of an escape, because ultimately that's kind of how I see fiction. And for me, although a lot of the books that I had access to in school never really represented me the way that I thought they should, or the communities that we live in, and always being like a writer, like I grew up a really shy writer. I always wanted to write fiction. I always wanted to really kind of give my community a platform, the stories that I wanted to tell. I know I would always have journals full of these stories. I was always too shy to share anyone, but I kind of found my voice through the art of spoken word poetry. Yeah, I kind of went to a poetry slam by accident and made the nationals team, and I kind of stuck with that for a while. And I also learned a lot about community, because spoken word and advocacy oftentimes goes hand in hand. And I learned a lot about the community on a deeper level, while also kind of learning my craft as being a writer. And I got to travel the country, and also, as much as building a community locally, I also got to be part of the national community as well of poets. I was lucky enough to meet poets and storytellers. But after I was done with that, I think it was 2017, I got back from my last national slam I went to, and knew I wanted to do more community work. I wanted to start writing more fiction that represented the city and the neighborhood of North End that I was in. And yeah, and I knew I had the tools to write a book, but I was just kind of not really sure how to really be there. I was sitting on the manuscript for a long time until I sent it in to Formac, and they were definitely interested in the story that I had to tell. And over I think it was over a span of a year and a half or so. We were
Mm-hmm.
just kind of going back and forth and doing edits and rewrites, and that's how my first novel, Worthy of Love, came about. Worthy of Love is about a young man in the north end of Halifax named Adrian Carter who has a lot of self-esteem issues around body weight, image, and throughout the story, he develops an eating disorder. And I thought that was a really good kind of story to tell, especially around the idea of exploring masculinity in the sense where it allows itself to be vulnerable. And I think a lot of men in our community need to start having those more vulnerable conversations and to, you know, really kind of like air out a lot of the things that we take in. And I was really happy to be able to use this book as kind of it's kind of like a tool to do that. Ever since this book came out, I think I spoke at around 30 schools or so around Nova Scotia, which
Mm-hmm.
I think when I first started writing and doing all that stuff, I could never see myself doing that. But when I started going to different schools is when I really realized how much this type of representation matters. One moment that stuck out to me a lot is when I went to this one high school over in Dartmouth, and one of the English teachers was telling me how this young man really loved my book and how he was saying like this book was written for someone like him. And it's moments like that which really kind of, you know, inspire me to keep doing this and to really kind of craft new stories for other underrepresented youth and really makes you realize like our stories matter too, you know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Andre, I really love that you spoke about like the beginnings of that inspiration in writing being for yourself, writing for yourself in school. You're young now, so you were, you know, so you started at a very young age in terms of thinking that through and thinking about it. And you know, for you at that time, were you reading other, well, maybe local authors as well? Like when you were doing your journaling and having a spoken word, did you have a chance to interact or to read local folks or folks African descent who were writers?
Hmm. Yeah, I know when I was first getting into spoken word, one of my big inspirations was Elle Jones. I
Mm-hmm.
remember in high school she came into one of my English classes. It was African Canadian literature, and it was that class that really kind of introduced me to spoken word, and it was really kind of I'm always such a shy person, and just seeing the way that like she was performing and the way I got to watch these other poets perform either through watching online on YouTube, or I remember when I was in that class, our teacher, Mr. Adams, brought in like his TV and a DVD player, and we watched the first few seasons of this show called Def Jam Poetry, and
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking like, yo, this is really cool. I'm way too shy to do this, but I really have to try this. But then I remember I met Elle Jones on another occasion, and she was telling me about this poetry slam, and we went to it. And I guess kind of through the local writers, I really got introduced to it through the art of the spoken word, and that was really my big introduction into it. And it was yeah, I went to my first slam over in Dartmouth High School it was, and I think that was in 2013. And yeah, so I guess for me kind of writing and performance was always a bit hand in hand, and it wasn't until later until I really got more involved within the lit community here. But I always kind of view everything as interconnected in a way, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
with the genres and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so interesting as well because, you know, I feel like it has a bit of a representation of how we see in community the interconnection between the various mediums of or displays of artistic, right? And that. So, you know, I had mentioned to you previous that we had a conversation with George Eliot Clark, and you know, a young author himself in the beginning. He's 23. He said when he was first published, but he also talked about for him the aspect of music, right? And so wanting to be a singer, you know, and a writer of songs, and how that was translated for him into his poetry work, into the books that he's authored as well. So I feel like kind of there's a bit of a theme already in that regard. And I also wanted to think about the role of mentors in this, because I heard you mention L. Jones, right? And I think other people would note authors as well. And it's my understanding from the work that you've been doing in schools and local, that I'm sure that if I asked a number of students or folks about mentorship, that your name would come up. So the importance of mentors, like, how would you speak some more about that for us?
Yeah, definitely. I would say in our community, mentorship is very vital. You know, I always kind of thinking of it as like it's very much like like I think a lot back about those times when like Al was my coach through like slam, poetry, and all that stuff, and nowadays I'm doing kind of the exact same thing as she was doing for me, and it's always kind of like, you know, passing it on to like the next set of like youth, and because like the youth that I'm helping now, like I can totally see them doing the same thing too, like in the very near future, you know, like it's always just kind of like it's always about giving back to the community as much as you know take as well. It's like you take the gifts, but you also give a gift back in a way as well, and that gift is oftentimes in the form of mentorship.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, here with at the Institute, the work that we're doing around, you know, growing our publishing arm, as we say, and certainly working to have resources available to tell our community voice story, and so that's known by ourselves for our community pride, but also for the broader community. And so, in your stories now about identity that you've mentioned, is there an important component for you that has the aspect of rooted in community as you continue to tell those stories?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I know with my new book that just came out with Nimbus Publishing, Annaka is really kind of based around it's about a character. She returns to her hometown after 10 years of being away, down in Yarmouth after being in Halifax for so long. And as she comes back, she really feels disconnected from that community. And there's a lot more in the story too. It's a bit of a fantasy novel, but through the course of the events in her story, she really kind of as these events are happening to her, she realizes how important it is to be connected into a community of people, regardless of how long as she's been gone away. But like that the community will always be there for her, and that they'll always have an open arms for her, regardless of what happens. And I think that I think especially for young people, sometimes it's very easy to feel disconnected in a way, but it's also kind of good to have like the representation out there for them to know that regardless of like what they're going through, it's always like there'll always be outstretched arms and for them to return to, you know.
You know, Andre, like in terms of, you know, the title, the label author, how did that feel for you when you like? So, what age, if you don't mind saying, would have been that first time that you really kind of realized that has one of the qualifiers of who you are?
Yeah, I would say my first book, Worthy of Love, was published when I was 23. And definitely it was, I remember what was going through my head during it. I remember I was like the most anxious person out there. Like before my first book came out, it was the first time I really felt anxiety full force, because it was such a vulnerable kind of book to put out in the world, and I was really scared what people would think, and being labeled author after writing it, I was like, people always know me as a spoken word poet. I'm like, I have no idea how this is gonna go. But
Mhm.
ultimately people loved the novel, and I was very kind of like my anxiety faded as I realized how important it was getting out, and kind of know that kind of wearing the title of being like a young Black author, it can be a super kind of powerful thing for people to see, you know,
Mhm.
especially having, you know, people seeing, like, especially young Black, like especially Black youth seeing another young a young Black writer putting in that work and creating those stories, you know. I feel like there's a certain type of like both like responsibility and opportunity at the same
Mhm.
time to really kind of you know, represent our community in a way that's very like accurate, but that's very truthful, and that makes us and allows ourselves to read about ourselves in a way that's vulnerable and honest, you know.
Mhm. 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 And I hear in what you've just talked about as well, for me, a connection with what has been happening around components of Black Lives Matter,
Mm.
right? And I would imagine that the opportunity to read into, right, and to speak to identity in a way that, is both affirming and correcting, if you will,
Mm.
for folks that are seeing things. So I don't know, if, like, how have you been experiencing as an author, a spoken word artist, Black
Mm.
Lives Matters and locally?
Mm. It definitely, I would say this year made me realize like the representation in these stories is more important than now than ever. It feels like I feel like that right now these stories are so necessary and needed, not for a lot of reasons, but I think most importantly, a lot of these stories are needed for healing the wounds that we're feeling right now. And
Mhm.
right now, this has been 2020 has been such a draining year, and I'm sure all Black people feel that for sure. And being able to, like, you know, release like a book or share my work and you know, have this little kind of like escape from reality somewhat, but also, you know, have that just have that like representation of
Mhm.
just like, you know, young Black people living their lives to the fullest, you know. I think that's very important right now, and I think these stories are so important for healing, because I know when I get hurt or feel down about everything, I always turn to fiction, either it being a good book or a show to binge into, or just anything really. I just need to have really good healing stories about Black folks, you know.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. Appreciate that. I want to just jump back to kind of in the beginnings when you talked about journals and stuff for those beginning days of writing. Is there advice that you would give to aspiring authors, aspiring writers, in terms of like where they can begin with their story, or how they can begin the expression of their story and stories?
Yeah, I would say like I would say always be open, and don't always be held down by one kind of genre. Always explore a little bit. I know with me, I was always so set on writing fiction, but then I fell into poetry and for a long time, but then I knew that really kind of helped me when I returned back to writing fiction, is learning the craft in a different way,
Mhm.
and always allow yourself to be versatile, but also don't be afraid to fail once in a while, you know, because
Yeah.
oftentimes we putting ourselves out there can be a scary thing. And I think a lot about the times that I got on stage and where I forgot my lines or messed up a poem completely. And I think about how I went back to the stage, and I didn't let those moments define me, but I let those
Mm-hmm.
moments inside of me grow, and it made me a better artist for being that vulnerable and allowing myself to fall, but also get back up. I think young writers always have that like fire inside of them to get stuff out there, and I think they should just totally go for it. Go for that exploration, either it being if you want to like, you know, like find some peers, make a writing group, or if you're in the poetry, start your own slam at like your high school or something, and you know, just kind of like keep that platform consistent, and keep the work consistent too, and also like networking is always a big thing. I know
Yeah.
when I go into school, when I go into schools and stuff, I remember when I was a kid, and they always had like writers in the schools and stuff, and I was the one kid that was always asking all the questions about getting books published and stuff like that. And like when the opportunities does arise, when like an author or something comes into your school, don't be afraid to ask so many questions, because that's what we're there for, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
writers are always shy, but it's all about kind of, you know, breaking that bubble, you know. And just yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's great advice. I appreciate your theme of openness, vulnerability, and um, feeling yourself, like being yourself in terms of expression and conversation, and yeah, and being open for advice on those mentors. I feel like those are kind of theme pieces that you've been sharing with us, you know, in that regard. And in terms of maybe the role that the publishing organization can play. Is there any advice that you would want to say directly to those folks that would help support folks who are interested, and maybe folks who are in and continuing on that journey?
Oh, totally. I think definitely with publishers, definitely every publisher has kind of a little different, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like every publisher has kind of different kind of, you know, wants and needs. Like when you look to like start applying for a publisher, make sure you look at what each certain publisher needs, and also make sure that like the story you're writing is a good fit. So not always, so always make sure to like check a publisher's latest catalog or something, if you can see your stories in there with them too. And definitely, yeah, also like I'll also read some books from that publisher as well. Like definitely, it's always an important thing to do. And yeah, definitely, you could always just Google, find their websites, and yeah, there's always a lot of information on there too. And also a good thing is to also check out a lot of book launches as well. Is like even like even like if you're going to support an author, you know, or if you just want to see what the event is like, and there's always people from the publisher there, and you can kind of get like a little kind of inside of what it's like to get a book published too, you know. It's a really exciting experience, and it's always really good to see it up close.
And what about and I'll cue you up to say, like, if there's kind of any kind of message, comments, or if there's any, I would like to invite you too, if you wanted, there's any piece from your book that you wanted to share with us during this time as well. Please feel free to do that. But what I wanted to make sure that I asked you about as well, like, so now we're in this time of Zoom meeting, all virtual, whatever. Do you feel like that might be an opportunity to expand the knowledge about discussions and content for authoring various works, or you know, how are you seeing it through the lens, if you will, this time?
Yeah, definitely. This Zoom era kind of rolled up, and definitely I think I've been kind of like it's honestly it's a lot easier to get the things now. You know, you don't have to worry about getting on the bus, or like you know, getting there on time and stuff like that. But also it also gives you the opportunity to to hear people, you know, to speak their truths in like more kind of like casual sense, it feels like. And yeah, I know when I released my book, my new book Annaka, we had a Zoom book launch, and it was really cool. It was through the
Mm-hmm.
Halifax libraries, and there was always like I felt like this time around people were more kind of confident to ask questions because it was all text. But
Yes.
definitely it does feel like there
Okay.
is a lot more a lot more questions to being asked, and a bit more of a back and forth between authors and participants, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like
Mm-hmm.
I think about being in the crowd and nobody wants to raise their hand, nobody wants their own hand being raised in the crowd,
Yeah,
right?
everybody's waiting for somebody else to start or to see what kinds of questions are okay questions. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's cool that that's maybe making things more accessible. We'll probably have some blended versions in the go forward, I would
Oh yeah.
imagine. Yeah,
I think
yeah.
definitely Zoom's here to stay now.
That's right. Yeah, the virtual world. Is there a piece you would like to from either one of your
Yeah.
authors
Well, I
share
might
with us?
read the intro of my new book, Annaka.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll read the first page and yeah. Actually, should I say what it's about first? Go into it.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
For
Hmm.
sure. So Annaka is a fantasy novel that takes place in Yarmouth about a young woman named Annaka, though she always hated her first name. Um, it's so she grew up in Yarmouth until she was 7 years old with her mom and her grandparents. She never met her father, but when she were to ask about him, she was often left with secrets or silence, and knew that they were and she knew that her parents were holding her mom and her grandparents were holding secrets from her, but she also had a secret of her own. Her best kept secret also happened to be her best friend named Clay, who was her imaginary friend who has the ability to warp reality from whatever's written into her
Mhm.
journal so she could delve back into past memories. And yeah, so, but it wasn't just kind of any journal. It was a journal that her grandfather gave her before she started grade primary. And yeah, so Clay's magic, and writing kind of a magic realism kind of novel starring Black characters is important. And though when Annaka turned 7, she moves to Halifax because her mom got accepted into university, and she returns 10 years later after her grandfather passed away. And she's really worried to come back because she's afraid that grief made it home ever way before she did. And
Uh-huh.
when she gets back to Yarmouth, she realizes everything is different. Her grandmother has Alzheimer's, doesn't remember who she is, and she's surprised to know that her imaginary friend Clay is still there. And he grew up while she was away. And a lot of the book is about them kind of rebuilding their relationship, their friendship, while also exploring secrets of her past as well. And
Hmm. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
and I'll jump into it and read the first page here. They say the first stage of grief is denial, and I speak from experience when I say that's true. When I heard the news, I felt numb, like someone unexpectedly hit the pause button on my feelings. I guess we always carry the expectation that the people we look up to will never die, but when they do, you begin to realize how mortal the rest of us really are. When I heard about my grandfather, I was in the main office of my school. There had been a call waiting for me. It was Mom, and her voice was cracking, but it was still strong. It's blurry, but I remember not being able to answer when she told me. I just sat there frozen. Anna, Anna, can you hear me? I heard Mom's voice. She was in her minivan on the way to pick me up. I hear you, I said quietly, but I don't want to believe it. Me neither, babe. I'm coming to get you. We have to head home. Home. That's a tough one. So it's just kind of the first page of the
Hmm.
book there.
Hmm.
And as you
Oh
can
my
see,
gosh, dripping with emotion. Thank you.
thank
Yes,
you.
thank you very much for that. Oh, it's been a really wonderful conversation, Andre. I really appreciate you taking the time, and the valuable sharing that you've given to us about your experience and encouragement. We've had focused a bit of the conversation went to young folks in school. I think that everyone though can hear in what you've said the potential for the work of authors, and we're encouraged now to continue to look to local authors for stories and for direction. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you both. That was a wonderful discussion, and that was a beautiful. I'm hooked on Annaka already.
Me
So that was
too.
beautiful. Thank you
Yes,
both.
great. Okay.